Hello everybody, it's great to be with you once again, being able to share with you insights into business and principles that I know that I deal with all the time. I deal with these challenging areas and concepts and contexts with my clients, and I want to share with you one that I've had on a regular basis that I get asked by my clients, and that is, how do I manage change? I've got this happening and I know I don't really understand the real dynamic of it. And so I want to talk through for a while with you today and walk through the dynamics of what managing change is really all about, because we all face it. It is interesting how the world in which we live has now got a new word that we're using about change management, that is disruptive technologies. And that's not necessarily meaning it's a digital technology or a social technology or a computer technology. It's just the dynamic of the world in which we are in is we are being disrupted by new insights and by new dynamics. And so management change is now disruptional technologies. And it happens all the time. And we've seen that in the taxi industry, the very dynamic of disruptive technology moving into that space. And so we've seen the way people have had to rethink about how they go about that kind of business, and the various dynamics that's causing both the business, the people who use those services, but also government agencies as they wrestle with the fact that this is a new dynamic, a disruptive technology has come into the marketplace, and none of us kind of really know how to handle it very well, but we're getting there. And it really is interesting that people do know and can work it out. So I want you to be thinking today about this conversation for yourself, because this is the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves is, can I do it? What will it look like? How did somebody else do it? What helped them? And plus many other questions like that as people wrestle with the context of managing change for themselves. And I'm thinking of an organization I'm working with senior leaders, and one of the leaders, his world is being totally disruptive because they're moving from one form of how they've operated to a totally new dynamic, new systems, new rules, new responsibilities, new accountabilities, new line managements. New people are going to be taking up roles, and maybe some of the dynamics of the business that they're actually in, some of it will be stopping and new business will be starting. And so how do you manage change in the midst of where it is incredibly fluid is one of the constant conversations that I have with my clients. Another client is wanting to develop managing change for her as she thinks about taking on a more senior role and doing preparation for that and getting her around that. So one of the areas that we've talked about to help her is let's figure out how you best communicate. So she's doing a communications profile, so we can work on that. So she's upskilled, so when she steps into a much more senior role, and one of the most powerful things that we can do is understand how we do communication. So we've got lots of pressures on us and lots of questions that we don't know the answers to. One of the key life competencies required of us all today, and of all the kinds of situations that we're in, is the ability to anticipate and respond to effectively to change. It is. I've gone through that this year with my wife as we handed over an organization. And prior to most of last year as we were working on it, for me it was a process. I knew about it, knew what it did, I knew the technicalities of it, but when we were actually entering into actually doing that dynamic of change, the impact that it had on me emotionally, I was quite unaware of what it would actually do to me. And so I was really pleased that we'd put the processes in right, we'd done really good communication, and people had responded in a really dynamic way, and that whole organization is about to be relaunched this week, and with the new leaders, new leadership, new styles, etc. And we're pretty excited about the majority of people within the organization are moving from organization A to organization B, and they're ready to run and go hard with that. And that's very, very exciting. And so when I then process it myself, I'm thinking, yes, we've done it well. We've managed that change effectively, and we've been able to move people effectively in that whole dynamic. So by demonstrating effective change skills, we will be able to lead ourselves. And this is one of the biggest battles of change management, is us, the person. Now, do we understand what's actually happening? And as I walk through today, I'll be telling you and giving you some insights in the power of story, the power of communication, some key principles about where people are on the scale of things, and helping you and I understand the very powerful dynamic of I need to lead me. And so if we don't understand I'm really important in this process, I need to understand my emotions, I need to understand my capabilities, I need to understand what will it look like for me going forward, and I need to do those kinds of processes. And then when change hits, we'll have done a lot of work on getting ourselves ready and getting the organization ready. And by effectively change skills, that we will be able to lead ourselves, but we'll then also be able to lead the individuals around our world and the groups and the communities that we are going to clearly impact. Because whenever change does happen, it's more than us that's involved in that. There is many more people involved in that. And change can happen in many forms. Sometimes it's very highly personal, like something I've just walked through in handing over an organization that I'd been in for the last 6 years. It was something I'd started from scratch, and now it was time to hand that over, to something that is a significant shift in circumstances. You know, we've moved from having our children, raising them up, them going out, getting married, and now moving into that grandparent phase. It is really quite personal and understanding, and I initially was struggling to get my head around the dynamic of being a grandparent. Those words seem to be old. They seem to belong to somebody else. But the moment that baby's born, something happens inside of you and you realize, yes, I can do that. So sometimes there's also perspectives about people, life, and life in general and business in general, about how we are going to work with that context. So I'm asking you today about what thinking you have done in this area of managing change or a disruptive technology coming into your world. Because let me tell you, if it hasn't, it will. And if you're avoiding it, don't. Because change, there is ways in which you can do that and do that really, really well. And I want to help you in this conversation begin to get your thinking juices going, getting them sparked up, so you are aware that this is a high probability for you and for myself, that change will happen, and it will happen to you in one way, form, or another. And I want to help prepare you do that. So I'm going to be back in just a short while. We're going to continue on in this conversation about how we're going to manage change to help you and I do it so much better. Thank you so much. Be back in a bit. And what we've discovered is that there is disruptive technologies coming in left, right, and center, and they are disrupting our world, and it can be really quite interesting what that does for us. So I want you to think about the kind of scale it's going to be for you. And I think if you and I get a better handle on managing change as being skilled at it, and the thing that you can do when you talk to me or get assistance from me is that I really have some very powerful tools. So I've got a skill builder that will walk you through the principle of managing change. I have a storyboard where we've done all the research on what change is, and I'd walk you through that and coach you through that. So there's lots of really, really cool resources for you and I to actually engage in those things. So I want you to understand it can be a very small change. You know, becoming a grandparent's not overly massive. That I've done just recently, I've handed over an organization which is a fairly large change, the one that my wife and I built and ran for 6 years. We've handed that over, and there's lots of impacts, not only on us, upon the people, but also the new organization picking up and running with that. Whatever the scope, size, or source of change, we usually have to adjust to the new situations because they're going to impact on the skills that we have or that we require, and the practices that we actually adopt to actually do the change that we need. And we might think we have the luxury of time. This is what we think sometimes with change. And I know I've got an organization right now that come June this year, my client is hoping to have a clarity to help lead himself and his team forward. And he's probably got 70 people that he's influencing across his organization. So it's a fairly key role, influencing a lot of people's lives that deliver a lot of services to people. And so he's hoping that he's going to have a lot of greater clarity by that in June this year, because the change could all be implemented by the end of this year, that everybody is actually moving in the new organization by next year. So they've got a little bit of time, but as we assessed it, we realized that that time scale was probably a little bit shorter than we first anticipated, and being aware of that. Because here's what we do. When change comes, we actually try to avoid it. We run away from it. We think it's too hard, too big, too difficult. It's somebody else's responsibility. And I want us as leaders to own the change. So we've done our mission, vision, values. We know our strategy and implementation. We know where we're taking the business, and change now hits. This is where it will hold up. We will hold up because we know what our business is about. And because we're mature leaders and you're listening to good coaching to help you grow as a leader, you're not going to run away, you're not going to avoid it, you're not going to say it's somebody else's responsibility. You are going to take charge and lead the responsibility. Let me illustrate it this way. I've talked to you about one of the key things that you and I must do, and that is taking that strategic hour to stop and think. The other thing that we need to do is we need to communicate. And so what I want you to think about is how will you begin, and I'm going to touch on this in a little while, how will you begin to tell the story? Now, how do we go about doing this? What I want you to think about is creating a way in which you can evaluate the change that is about to come into your world. What kind of ways are you going to think through what you might do to evaluate? So let me give you a couple of dynamics. You need to be aware of the present position you, your team, and your business is currently in. What is it like? Describe it, write it down, understand it. Understand the stakeholders and the shareholders and the implications that are in and around your world, the financial implications, the market implications. Really get a handle and own the real present situation, because that alone will help you do some really good work on what the story is of your business and what the change will actually, as you progress through this evaluation, how you will understand what change will do if you know, because this is what you're doing. When you're understanding the present situation, you're actually laying a foundation by which change is going to be built on. So it's not something ethereal. It's not like a cloud that you really can't grasp. You really want to have this very tangible and very real, because this will be the foundation. Whatever the change looks like in the future, you know where you are right now and the real dynamic of what that actually is going to be for you. The second thing to do is ask yourself, what are your available resources? You know, we have all sorts of resources. We have human resources, we have financial resources, we have market resources, we have resources of our staff, we have resources of our directors and of our boards, we have resources of our shareholders, we have resources of the community at large and the marketplace. All of those are really powerful resources for us, and understand what they are again. Articulate it, be clear about it, write it down, understand what they are, because as you build the foundation, we know what the business is at, we know where our resources are, because you'll need to know what resources you will use in and for what area. Here's a challenge for you. I've touched on it just briefly. Let me really focus in on it. That is time available. You are going to need to give more time into your change management area than you imagine you are going to need to do. Time available, you're going to need to say, I've got to set more time aside, I've got to give more time to this, I've got to make myself more available, and you've got to do that right across the whole organization. People are going to be pulled into the conversation to actually work on the whole project of whether it's a very small part of the business or it's going to impact the whole of the business. You're going to actually need to understand the degree of time available and understand let me understand, this is Murphy's Law. The time that you need is more time than you think you need. So don't be afraid of giving it more time, because if you do that, you'll do it well, and it really, really will help you. And here's something to really understand. You and I need to own up to our own personal preferences, because we have a problem, that we have an agenda. It's our agenda about us, and we have our preferences about us. We have our interests about us, and if that's the case about us, every other person that's impacted by this change will have their own personal preferences, and that's going to impact them and have a dynamic on them. And some changes that you're going to do will not fit the personal preferences that those people have. And if you understand where the business is at, you've got that present position, you understand the resources, you know the time, and now you understand people, those really powerful principles will help you as you step through this whole dynamic of managing change. And don't be fearful of it. Change is challenging, but change can be really, really inspiring. And I work with my clients to help them see that dynamic of that. So let's do business better. Let's manage change better. And so evaluate. It is not going to be that problematic. As a friend of mine quotes to us and to me when we talk on this subject, is that we actually all engage in change in lots of ways all the time. We change what we eat, we change what we drink, we change what we wear, we change how we sleep. Lots of change we do. Here's what we struggle with when we're managing change, and that is the dynamic of change that seems to be out of our control. So that's a quote from my mate Michael. Thank you, Michael. Pretty cool. What I want to help you with as we process this and realize we're talking about us getting a handle on change is people and change. And I love this part because this is really fun to understand people. And this goes to my 13% principle. I believe you don't need that many. Say you've got 100 people in your organization. You don't need to get the top 13 people. You just need to get 13 people who get the message, who will work with you to actually bring about the change in your organization. So let me give you some language by which that's expressed. And so what I want you to understand is you're looking initially for pioneers. So I want you to understand there's a bell curve in front of you. So a flat line and a bell curve. And at the left hand, as I'm looking at it, as I look into the screen, on the left-hand side of my bell curve is where I'm going to put pioneers. They are people that I'm going to talk about this to, and they are going to get the message really quickly, really fast, and they're going to say, when do we start? And pioneers are absolutely brilliant, or sometimes what I call them is my initiators. And so I love this because when we break it down into the whole dynamic of 100 people, you're only looking for a few pioneers, 4 or 5, to actually help you get this whole thing started. And this is not about you broadcasting the whole dynamic of change across the whole organization. I'm going to talk about that in just a little while. What I'm doing is helping you understand the people that you're going to manage in change and where they fit on the spectrum or the bell curve of life. And you will find people will fit into all of these areas, and they don't fit into all of these areas all the time. They will change where they fit as to what is applicable and what's approachable for them. So pioneers are great. You know, I've got a picture in my mind of the wagon trains going across the Great West of the United States of America in the very early days, they were called pioneers. They went open and broke open new ground, and for others to follow. So then the other wagon trains followed, and then the trains followed, and then many people followed, and great towns and cities have been built right across America because of pioneers that went out and broke the ground for that organization. And that organization was the founding of the American nation. You know, we've had that in our own great nation of Australia. And if you come to Australia, and if I take you into the bush and show you what it was like for our early pioneers, what they experienced, no air conditioning, no access to water easily, you had to go hunt for it, you know, hot, dry, arid land, you would recognize that these people did it hard and tough, but they were amazing people because they toughed it through. They built cities, they built roads, they built farms, they built businesses, and they opened up this great Southland that is called Australia. And it's a great, great, great place to be a part of. So I want you to understand that is really, really important, because these are the people that embrace the new quickly. And you're looking for those people, and that you will find them at all levels of your business. The second area is pioneers, initiators, same kind of language, and then your early adopters. And this is your other 6 or 7 people that you're looking for. Remember, we're talking about 100 people. I'm using my 13% principle because these guys and girls are great because they work with you. They listen to the word that you're sharing with you and your pioneers, and they hear that story and I get that. I'm not ready to pioneer, but I'm ready to work with the pioneers to help them achieve what they want to achieve. And early adopters are just enthusiastic people, full of energy, full of enthusiasm, you know, really helping you because they help sharpen you, they give you more energy. They're people that will work with you and for you. They'll help the pioneers move into the new land, a new area, new territory, and create energy for others that need to follow. And I know this when I work with my clients and tell them this and help them see whatever organization you're not trying to convince everybody, because that's just too hard a task. You know, we've got 7 billion people. I'd like them all to behave a certain way. That's not going to happen. But if I can influence my pioneers, then influence my early adopters, and the message I want to get out, I'll find it going out faster, quicker, sharper, more enabled, because I'm multiplying myself into others and I'm not trying to do it by myself. And the power of having people walk with you and work with you is really, really, really cool. And so the dynamic of that for you and I is, you now know my pioneers are going to break open the land and my early adopters are my energy force. What kind of people do you want next? You want followers, or sometimes what I call them is my adopters. These are the people that get the message that you've shared, the pioneers have shared, and the early adopters have shared, and say, yep, you've opened the land, you've made the way, I've caught the spark, I'm ready to follow. And there's a lot of people in that space. I mean, a lot of people. It's the biggest quadrant on your bell curve. And so when you get this movement, when you're managing change for your organization, you are moving quite dynamically across a vast majority of your organization, because here's the problem. You're going to get resistors. And so when you've got a majority of people like you have with yourself, your pioneers, your early adopters and your followers, you've got a lot of people working with you and working for you. But you need to recognize the resistors. They are really quite a unique group of people. Sometimes it can be maybe 10% of any group of people that you have in and around your organization. And those 10 people will vary in intensity as to how much they resist. And so, but the other thing I really love about resistors is because they teach you the analytical problems that you have not yet seen. So your resistors are really an interesting group of people because they open your eyes to see problems that you've glossed over, you haven't thought about, you haven't engaged in, you didn't understand could actually happen. And they actually are a great asset for any organization. But what we can do when we come up against a resistor is we shut them down, close them down, cut them off, fire them. And that can be detrimental for us having a great learning experience in what's going on in and for our business. So it really is an interesting dynamic of managing change. Remember, you're going to be out of control a bit. That's okay. You'll learn the skills. Understand these people and watch the difference it will make when you understand what you are. Find your pioneers. Together then find your early adopters. The followers will come and the resistors will help you do what you do really sharp and really dynamic. Talked about being disruptive technology, and it can also be that this is where you lose control, and that's a bit of fun. So, and that's why I'm talking about this today, so you have a better awareness and you can do better at it. Remember, I've talked to you previously about this whole dynamic, and if you haven't, please go back and listen to my podcast and webcast. They're on I'm on my iTunes and soon to be on a number of other podcasting expressions, and my webcast, of course, is on YouTube. Lots of content there for you. I've touched on this, the power of communication. I want to illustrate it through story. And I love doing this when people say to me, you know, how do I understand what I do? And I say to them this, that there is a story on the inside of you. What you haven't yet done is taken notice of that story. And all I want you to do is listen to how you express that story. So my business is Peak Consultancy, and my motto is climb the mountain, see the view. And I, for a long time, looked at lots of ways in which people were telling their story, and they kept it simple and they kept it short. And I just began to tell my story to people, and eventually I realized, I want to take people to the top of the mountain. I want them to experience this amazing dream on the inside of them, to help them experience for themselves the reality of this dream, this desire, this motivation, this purpose, this story in them. So let me illustrate it this way. There is a really interesting young man. I think he's an Australian, but he could be another nationality. But I enjoy reading his posts because this is what he's doing right now. He is climbing every peak. I think there's 7 or 8 of them continuously. So Mount Blanc, Mount Everest, etc. All the 7 largest peaks in the world, climbing them, getting down, and going on to the next one, continually climbing them. Nobody has ever done that before. A number of people, about 14 only, have climbed all the peaks, but nobody has ever done it one after the next, after the next, after the next, to complete that. And I think he's done 3 or 4. And it's great watching the blogs, the posts come up on social media. It is most inspiring. And let me illustrate it this way as well, by story. If you want to really understand change, there is a really cool story about a little penguin that went swimming one day under the iceberg it was on. And under the iceberg, this was in the middle of summer, it found that in the middle of the iceberg that there was water. And the little penguin realized that come winter, the water would freeze and would split the iceberg, and the colony of penguins that was on the iceberg would be devastated because they might not be able to get to another iceberg. And so this colony of penguins could actually be lost because they'd swim and swim and swim and swim, but they would get so tired that they would eventually drown or be eaten by the orcas in the great oceans of the world. So what this little penguin did was went to the colony and began to try to tell the story of what the penguin had discovered. So I won't tell you any more because you can find this story in a really cool book called The Iceberg is Melting. It's a parable about managing change. And so I want to help you manage change. I want to help you be aware that it happens all the time. I want to help you be aware that this disruptive technology is being thrust upon us and appear like we're out of control. I've helped you identify the people that are in and around your world. I've talked about the skills that you need to engage in for you as a leader. But if you understand the story of managing change and you can tell your story well and communicate it well, you will answer so many difficulties in the whole dynamic of what change management is all about. And when I talk to people about this, when they are leading an organization, and I've just recently practiced that, is we decided that really, really important to be clear about our message that we were going to do with and for the organization, what we were going to do, stepping away, handing the organization over to another organization, and helping people make that transition. And what we did was we told our story and we communicated really, really clearly. And because we did that, and we looked at the difficulties that could arise from that, we recognized we were going to be challenged and recognized some of the dynamics that were going to be out of our control. And I know at times I felt quite uncomfortable. But because we had clear communication, and we told the story in a transparent, honest, integrity-filled manner, when people heard that, they understood it fairly quickly and fairly easily. And I just love the fact that my whole principle is be clear in your communication, tell the story, and people will get it. And you don't have to try to overly convince them. And this is what we've tried to do in the past when we've tried to manage change we've told them to do this, you're going to do it, and you're going to do it this way. But people actually want you to engage with them on a personal and intimate fashion and treat them with respect and honesty and treat them with that they're adults and that they're thinkers and treat them that they can actually work this through for themselves in a mature and in a dynamic way. And when the iceberg looks like it's going to melt, you will have actually built a strategy by which, if the iceberg is going to melt, you know where you're going to move to next. And that's the power of what managing change is all about, is about you and I understanding where we're going to move to. We might not have all the answers, and most of the time we probably won't. But because we built a good foundation, we've recognized our resources, we understand our own perceptions and the people around and about us and the implications going on. We understand the kind of people movement we're going to make. We're clear about our communication methodologies, and we're telling the story in a clear and a dynamic and a powerful way. And we then trust people. People are quite amazing. They will get what you are about. And I love the fact that I've just practiced that, done that, and it's just gone so very, very well. And I'm really, really pleased with not only our involvement, but the whole organization's involvement and where they're going to move to next. And so I practiced, in a sense, what I preach. I've put it into a very real context. I've worked this through. I've understood. And we know from research that you can lose anything up to 25% of people in any organization doing any major change. But it looks like we might only lose about 10 people. And that's almost natural transition. A natural movement that they were already going to make. So we're really, really pleased. And I want to encourage you, if you will grasp this, not be fearful of it, not avoid it, not run away from it, not think it's too hard, too difficult, doesn't belong to me, somebody else can deal with it. You take ownership of it, understand these principles. And let me tell you, the power of having other people in our world, and we sought counsel, we asked for advice, we took on coaching, and it really, really helped us. That's why you need somebody like me in your room as you go through this kind of change dynamic, because we'll help clarify those areas for you. It's just a great delight to have these kinds of conversations with you to help you and I do this better so we can do and build businesses better. So you will see below a link, and I want you to subscribe. I want you to subscribe for you and for me. And there's a bell. And the bell is really cool because you tick that and it will give you a notice of when my new content. And let me tell you this, I do it all the time. I'm doing it every week, putting up new content for you so we can do business better. This is John Hardy from Peak Consultancy. Climb the mountain and see the view with me. It is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.